Hello. How's everybody doing? Let's just do a couple of things. Cool. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if you can hear me. We've got a few people in here waiting. Hey, Ostap. How is it going? I'm just going to send a tweet out real quick to say that we're live. Cool, perfect. It's not too loud, okay? That's fine. I can turn it up a bit. How does that sound? Does that sound any better? Let me know if the audio is any better. We should be all good in OBS. Yep. Yep. Cool. Perfect. Right, I'm just going to share a link in Discord as well. Great. Cool. We've got a few people in here. Say hello if you are here. Hey Kevin, how's it going? Shafi, hello from Afghanistan. Nice. What time is it in Afghanistan? I imagine it's pretty late. Cool. So let's get started on what we're going to be working on. So if you haven't seen already, the Larajam website up here. 2:20 p.m. in Florida. Nice, not a bad time then. I chose 7 p.m. UK time because I figured it was 5 hours behind on the East Coast, and in Australia it's going to be like 10 or 11 hours ahead. So as people are waking up in the morning, things would have already kicked off. So if you haven't seen already, the Larajam website is live. You can go over there, 9 p.m. in Ukraine. Cool. The Larajam website is live, so you can go over there. You can register for the event. You just click onto here. We've got a prize list. We've got some brilliant prizes provided by lots of people in the community. So we've got like Ray licenses. If you're not aware of Ray, it's a product by Sparsi. We've got desktop apps, courses from people, PHP Storm licenses, lots of different prizes. So thank you to everyone who provided those prizes. We've also got coupons. So if you're registered for the event, you can head over to this page and use some of these coupons to get a discount on products. So if you want to subscribe to Code Course, you can get 25% off their Pro plan. We've got some books, we've got some SaaS products as well. Larajobs, if you're working for a company that's looking to advertise a new job, you can get $100 off any job listing. Some of these do expire, so if you're going to use them quickly. But tonight what we're going to be working on is the submission process for Larajam itself. So the event finishes on Sunday at 7 p.m. British summertime, so UTC +1. But we need a submission process. So when your project's finished, you can come on here, put in the name of your project, check some boxes to say that you've done everything correctly, and the GitHub repository as well for the project. So we need a form for people to submit for that, which is great. And then once we've got those submissions, we're going to build an export as well, a CSV export, so that I can quickly get a list of all of the submissions that have been made and send them out to all of our judges. So let's just go ahead and get started. I've got a VS Code app here. It's a Laravel app, very basic. There's only a few models. So we've got the event, we've got a pivot model. We can actually get rid of this. We've got the user, the prize, the event, the coupon, and the event user, which is a pivot model. The custom pivot model is being used so that I can just store some information against the registration. So I can find out if you've registered as a team or if and information about your team members, which is great. So we've got all of these models in place. Maybe I need to zoom in a little bit here. How is that size-wise for everyone? Is that big enough and readable? If I open up a file, that should be pretty big. So yeah, we're going to be using some Livewire. For the forms, we're going to be using the filament forms package. So you can see the filament forms package over here. This is a really nice way to build out forms with Livewire, Alpine, Tailwind, and Laravel. It makes it really quick and easy. We're already using it for the registration form and the login form. So let's do, let's actually do the participate form as an example. So you can see here we've got a form schema method, and we just have like these field objects that we can pass through, and they all get attached to some public properties on the Livewire component, which makes it really nice and easy to build forms pretty quickly. They're all styled, it's not headless, there's styled forms, which you can see here. So this is the example. If I click yes, it will show the repeater, and then you can add team members. So this is all really nice. So what we're going to do is start off by making a new Livewire component, I guess. So let's do PHP artisan make Livewire, and the name of the component is going to be events submit. We can make that. So this is going to create a new submit component as well as the blade view. So we can go ahead and start building out the form, I suppose. So we need to implement a contract or an interface provided by the filament forms package, and it's going to have a go at us because we've not implemented all of these methods. So we can use the interacts with forms trait, and that will implement all of those methods for us. And we also need to add a protected function called get form schema, and this is going to return an array of fields. So what fields do we actually need? Let's create just a to-do.md file. So what fields do we need? We need the name of the project, the GitHub repository URL. We also need to check that your repository is public. So we can do this here, check repo is public. We also need to make sure that you've added a README confirmation. So when you submit your repository, we're going to ask that you include a README file with any installation instructions that are required. So if you're using Stripe, for example, in one of your projects, we're going to make sure that you include steps to set up Stripe. Any additional services or configuration steps that are needed in like your environment file, for example. We'll probably leave out all of the basic stuff like valet and git clone and creating a database. So we can get started with the name, the repo URL, and the README. Let's save all of those. So we can use a text input, and we're going to create a public name property. So this will link up to the name field. We also need, we'll make this required to begin with. We'll also need a URL, so public URL. This is also going to be required, and it will need to be a URL. And looking back at our to-do, we need a checkbox to make sure that you've put the README in there. So we can use a checkbox field, and we can just call this confirmation for now, and this is required. And the reason we're going to use this checkbox field is to prevent someone from submitting a project that doesn't have a README or the information that we're requiring. So let's also do public confirmation equals false by default, and we'll type in that as a Boolean. And that's just about it really for the actual form, at least for now it is. So let's head over to the view itself. Let's also create a root. So we've got some root files here. Let's create a new get root called submit. And we can actually just point this straight to the Laravel component, because Laravel components act as invocable controllers. If you go to the base component class, there is an invoke method, which will handle all of the view rendering and the response generation. Perfect. So let's go back to the submit file, or actually let's go to the browser and try to visit this root. Great, we've got an empty layout with the logo. Let's also, a bit of a poor design choice really when I was building this app. But if you look at the participate, we've got like a slot here that we need to include. This is probably something we can refactor out later. But this is just including the drop down in the top right where you can go to your profile or log out. Perfect. So let's render the form. So we need to create a new form, get rid of the action, and hook up the submit event. And this will just go to a public function submit on the Livewire component. So we can call that there. And with the filament forms package, it's just as simple as echoing out this form. So the form itself has a toString method or toHTML method, I believe, which will handle rendering all of the fields and the groups and so on. So looking at this in the browser now, our form fields are showing up, which is great. We probably want to change some of the fields here, some of the labels for the field at least, which is very simple as well. So we can edit the form fields and give them a label. So project name, GitHub repository URL. And for this one, I confirm that I have written and I have included a README file with installation, with setup instructions and any extra information needed to run the project. Great. So let's go back to Chrome, have a look at this. So we've got our project name, we've got our GitHub repository URL, we've got the checkbox, and let's add a button in as well. So in VS Code, back in the view, I'm just gonna nab a button from over here. Let's create a button component whilst we're here. So button, VS Code, can format this, no. This is gonna take a slot, and just so that we can modify some of these classes if need be, we will use the attribute merging functionality of Blade components. And we'll default the type to submit explicitly. Although actually no, we won't. That is the default for a button. Oh, it's midnight in India. Wow. So we've got the form. So let's use our new button component and put submit project. And we should have a nice blue button. Let's wrap this in a div, and we'll just use flex to place it on the right hand side. So we can use flex and justify content end, and this will put the button on the right hand side. And we also probably want some margin. So let's just do an MT4. Oh no, we need more than that. Let's do an MT8. Perfect. So right now we can submit this form, but we actually want to disable this submit button until you've clicked the checkbox. So the way we can do that is by saying make this field reactive. So by default, all of the form fields in a filament form use the defer attribute, which you can see wire model.defer over here. So that means the data isn't submitted back to the server until you call an action, or in this case, submit the form, which calls the submit action on the component. But we actually want this to be dynamic. So when you check that, it should update the server and then enable the button. We could probably also do that with some Alpine, maybe. But we'll just do it with Livewire for now. We can come back and optimize this later. So we'll say the disabled attribute is going to be bound to the confirmation variable. Missed a quote. So confirmation. So if we go to the browser, it's still enabled, but let's have a look. Confirmation isn't showing up. It needs to be not confirmation. So if confirmation is false, then it will be disabled. So we can see that disabled does get added, but the styling doesn't appear disabled, which we can fix with Tailwind, I believe. So let's do in the button component. Let's say let's just add a class attribute and say when it's disabled, we want the BG opacity to be 50. And pointer events none. That should do it. So let's just add this into our class list up here. And try this out in Chrome. So the button's disabled at the minute. I can't click on it. I can highlight the text. That doesn't really matter. And now we need to make this field reactive. So when you check that, it should tell the server that you've confirmed and you're therefore allowed to submit the project. So we go to the submit form and we just call the reactive method. And now when you look at this checkbox, the defer modifier is no longer on the wire model attribute. So if I check this, it's going to send a request to the server, set confirmation or confirmed to true, and then re-enable the button. Or at least in theory it should. It's no longer disabled, but cursor events is still null, and that is because I just said always set pointer events to none. So no cursor events. If I say it is confirmed, I can then submit the form and all of these required fields will kick in. Perfect. So this is working. This is great. Now let's take the naive route and create a new model for this. Or do we want to make a new model? So we have event user table, which is the pivot table. And this is essentially like your registration for the event. So I say which user, which event, whether you're working as a team, and the list of team members as well. So in the theory, we could just add some more columns here. So if I do make migration, add submission columns to event user table. And we can open this migration up. So we've got a string for the project name. We've got a string for the project URL. We don't need to worry about storing information about the confirmation. We just need to store the URL and the name of the project. So let's run these migrations. And over in the model, so the event user model, we don't need to change anything there in terms of casts, but in the event, we need to say with the pivot information. Is there a nicer way of saying with all pivot information? Like, can I do an asterisk here? Does that work? Because if that does work, then that'll be perfect. Because this isn't like a nullable field. It doesn't have a default value. So I wonder if I can, let's have a look at where pivot columns is used in this file. With pivot, I imagine the with timestamps method does something with the pivot. So with timestamps, yeah, so that adds the created at and updated at fields. Let's try and use like an asterisk like this just to see if this works. Because I know if you've got like DB select, you can like do all fields. But that's because it's being translated into the SQL, I suppose. If anyone knows in the chat, let me know, because I've never actually done that before. I very rarely use custom pivot models or pivot model data. The best way to try that really is just to go here and say, can I remove it altogether? I can, if I update that. Oh, okay, I can just remove it altogether, I suppose. So the with pivot method is going to like eager load the pivot model, which doesn't really matter. If I just remove that method, does that still work? Oh no, okay, it doesn't work. So I do need the with pivot. So let's try and do the asterisk approach. You have an error in your SQL syntax. As pivot from events inner join, select events.all event user ID as pivot user ID. Oh boy, that's a long old message, isn't it? Okay, so I guess we'll just go back to explicitly. So as team members. What else did we have? Project name and the project URL. Yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting to like DD that maybe. Just see what the query is. So select all from events, inner join event user on events. So that's not actually doing the select, is it? Oh well, we can just leave it like this, that's fine. If that's the way it has to be, that's the way it has to be. Let's add this over here. So with pivot, like that, some trailing commas. So back in Chrome, that should all be working. Yep, it does seem to be. Great, so let's actually get some of this working correctly. Let's start by doing some validation. So over in the submit component, we need to, inside of here, call this form getState. And what this method call does is, excuse me, this method call actually handles the validation. So internally, it's going to call this validate, which triggers the validation errors on the front end. And we can just DD state here, just so that you can see. If I say testing, this needs to be a URL. So we'll submit. You can see the data's been dumped out here. So that will handle the validation. We actually want to make sure that this is a GitHub URL. So we can add a custom rule. So we'll say rules. And inside of here, it's already required. The URL method is going to add the URL rule. But we only need a single rule. So we'll pass in a callable. And I always forget the validation closure. I always forget the syntax or the arguments for this. So we'll just copy and paste those across. In case you're wondering what this is Raycast, and I've got a simple custom script that will search the Laravel documentation and open up the first result. I wonder if I have a gist for it somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So this is the, in case you're interested, I'll paste that into the chat and I'll pin that so that you can always see it. But it's just a JavaScript file that uses the Algolia client to search the Laravel 8.x indexes and just opens the first URL, which in theory should be the the most accurate result if Algolia is working correctly. But Raycast is very similar to Alfred if you're on macOS. There's lots of things that you can do, but I've just got a Laravel script that does that for me. And you can write in different languages. I think you can write in Swift or Python. I just chose Node because of NPM, to be honest. And who actually likes writing Python? Cool, so we've got this here. This is exactly what we need. So we'll pass in this. Unless there is a validation rule that does like a string contains. I don't think there is though. I don't want to do starts with. Although I could do starts with, and I could say that it has to start with HTTPS, github.com. That could work. Is there a method for that? Starts with? No. We'll just say starts. What is it? Underscore. So starts with HTTPS github.com. And that should work. Let's try that out. So we can go over here and just do testing. Let's just do google.co.uk or .com. Yeah, so the error gets output there. So the GitHub repository URL must start with one of the following, and it must start with github.com. So that's pretty cool. I've never actually used that validation rule before. I normally just write a closure. But that's perfect. That's exactly what we need. We do need to change the message though, because the formatting seems to be slightly off. I guess it's trying to change the case into like camel case or something like that. So what's the best way to do that? I believe the interacts with forms method will get validation attributes. I think that's it. Is there a method to validation attribute? This might do it. GitHub repository URL. Let's try and submit that again. Yeah, perfect. That fixed it. So that one's got client-side validation. It will also have server-side validation. We can check that just by removing the required attribute for now. So if I submit that, it's going to say the project name field is required. Again, let's do this project name. There's obviously something going wrong with the whole label to validation attribute logic. To be fair, what I actually have been doing recently is removing the name of the field completely and just saying that this field is required. So that could be another option that will remove that. We can do the same with starts with, like this field must start with one of the following values. That could work. So then we can get rid of that completely. Yeah, cool. So that was fairly easy to do. Excuse me. What else do we want to do? We want to write some tests, some actual tests. And I've got a very basic test suite already that's just handling some like authorization checks, the login component and the register component. It's using pest. Tests, feature, livewire. I've just got some auth tests as well as some HTTP tests. So let's do a test for this component too. So let's do PHP artisan make test. And this is going to be livewire events submit test. And the latest version of Laravel actually has a pest flag on the make test command, which will use a pest style stub. And that will create a submit test file. We can get rid of this completely. And I always like to start by checking that the component can be mounted. the best reason for doing this really is because if you have a mount method up here and you change something and it doesn't actually work, then your test is going to pick that up. So up here we can say livewire test, the name of the component, and we can just assert that the status is 200. So if we run this test here, we have an issue. Call to a member function, full name on null, and that is because we need to log in. So before each test, we will run a function that just logs the user in. And this is a helper function which creates a user, sets that as the current authenticated user, and returns the user as well. So we can log in, and now if we run this file, it should pass. Great. Perfect. So our next test, we need to test that these fields get validated correctly. So it correctly validates data. So again, we'll do livewire test submit class. And I'm going to break these up so we can say check that valid data passes validation rules. So we can say component, and we can do a set call here. So we'll pass in an array. We'll set the name just to some random words. So we'll say 3 words is fine, as text is true. The URL, we'll do safe. Is there not a safe URL? We can say URL, and we can also set confirmation to true. And if we call submit, we can assert there's no errors. And if we run this, it failed currently. Component has errors, URL failed asserting that false is true. Of course, this is because it needs to begin with github.com. So if we run this test again, it passes. That's great. So we can check that invalid data does not pass validation checks or rules. So component set, and because I've got like multiple calls being chained on, I can just place it on the next line instead. So we'll set name, or we won't set anything actually. We'll call submit straight away and assert that errors has name required, URL required, and confirmation is also required. So if we run this, it should fail, or should pass. Component has no errors found, asserting that false is true. Yes, that is because we've got the setup here. So we will need to, is there like a reset? There's no reset method. I guess I can just do name empty, URL empty, and confirmation false. Run the tests. This is going to fail because the confirmation component actually is present. It does have a value, so the required check is going to fail. But if we run this again, you can see that the test is passing. What did I just cancel? I need to run my watches just so that any styles get picked up. Great. Let's also set some more data. So we can set name to just some words again, but we'll leave URL blank. Well, actually no, we'll set URL to just a random URL, and that way when we call submit, we can assert has errors URL, and it will be a starts with error, which passes, which means it's running correctly. And we can assert has no errors for name as well. So let's just do pest run. Perfect. And other validation rules, we've done required, we've done the starts with rule. What else do we need? I think that's basically it for validation. So checking that the required rules work, checking that the starts with rule works, that is great. And we've already verified that the starts with rule passes correctly up here. So we've got like our happy case up here, everything's worked well, and then we've got our sad case or unhappy path where validation rules fail. So our next test is going to be that it correctly updates the event user record. So for this to work, we're going to need access to an event. So we'll say public event, and because we're using the routing, this will automatically pick up the event from the current route, which if we create a mount method and just dd this event for now and go back to Chrome, you'll be able to see this is the event that we're looking at right now. Let's just remove that dd though. But this also means that we now need an event to create the component in the first place. So if we were to run this file, it will still pass, surprisingly. Why is that still passing? The reason that's still passing is because is it trying to resolve that from the container? Let's just run this. Typed property event must not be accessed before initialization. Of course, so you don't have to set a default value for the event, and it will only cause an issue when you try to access it. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick sip of my drink. Okay, that's fine. So we should be able to create an event here. So we'll say event factory create, and double check that I've actually created a factory for the event. So we've got name, starts at, ends at, that's fine. We'll just dd the event here just to be safe. So we'll run this test and we get our event. Perfect. And then we can test the submit component and pass through that event. Is there a handy method? Yes, there is. Let's run this. All right, that dumps the HTML, doesn't it? We need to get event. We'll make sure that the event's being passed through correctly. Yes, it is. Great. So we've got our event being passed through. We also need to make sure that the user has registered for that event. So we can just like kind of force it here instead of adding factory methods. So we can get the current user. This is just a helper function. I have a GitHub repo for that somewhere. Ryan GJ Chandler, Laravel Helpers. Yeah, so I've got a repository with a bunch of helper functions, one of them being user. And if we take a look at that, we had it up a second ago, it's wrapped in a class exists check, so it assumes that the user model exists in this location. And it's really just a wrapper for the auth user, but with a better type hint. Because the auth user method type hints the return value as authenticatable, so you don't get any auto completion on the user model. So we'll say user events, and we'll just attach that event, and we'll say as team is false. Perfect. Something that we didn't do, actually, now that I think about it, is we didn't make those columns nullable. So make project columns on event user nullable. So schema table event user, and then our callback function. I can't type. So the blueprint table string project name is nullable, and the project's URL is also nullable. So let's just migrate that so they're nullable. And up here, we'll just double check that this has actually been created. So event user, we're going to assert that the user ID is the current user's ID. The event ID is the event ID, and as team is false. So let's just run this test, and that's passing, which means all of this is working correctly up here. Drop a message in the chat if you've got any questions or ideas. It's pretty boring at the minute, just writing tests, but it has to be done. So if we set some fields, let's just do faker words as text true. We'll do we'll actually just use the the Larajam URL, which I can't remember the name of. We'll just do my website repository, and I can't type, and we'll set confirmation to true. Well, that doesn't really matter, does it? I guess we probably need some validation to make sure that the field is true. So we'll say if not this confirmation, we can just add an error ourselves, which is kind of cheeky, but please check this, or please confirm. Please read and confirm the above before submitting. Because what someone could do really is they could come on here and they could just remove the disabled attribute themselves, like this. It's no longer disabled and they can submit. So if I do test in github.com, you know, you're all developers, so you know how to do these things. But if I remove the required there, I could technically submit this. So now we've manually added an error using Livewire. We could also do this in a closure. So we could add a custom rule up here, like so. So I guess it's attribute value fail. We could say if value is not equal to true, then we fail with this message. Like so. I guess that also works. That's probably a bit nicer than the manual way up here. Let's just double check that. Let's go back here, remove the disabled and try to submit. Alright, we need to remove the required as well. So if I try to submit that, unable to resolve dependency, parameter 0 attributes. Okay, so this is obviously doing, yeah, that's not going to work because the filament forms package is trying to pass you some like default arguments to this callback function. So I suppose you, let's think about this. If I add this back, let's just add this back if I can. No, apparently not. That's fine. We'll just leave it like this. We'll leave it like this. So if you haven't confirmed, we're going to add this error ourselves. And we have the state. That's fine. Let's go back to our test. So we'll set all of these up. We'll call submit. And then at that point, it should update the event user row. So we'll need to keep a reference to the name there. So we can assert the database has a row in the event user table where the event ID is the event ID, the user ID is the current user's ID, the project name is equal to name, and the project URL is equal to that, like so. And this is going to fail at the minute because the database stuff hasn't been set up, and I also can't type. But this will fail because we can't find anything in the database with those project columns filled in. So let's add that functionality. We'll say submit. So user events where how have I done this in participate? Oh, that's the method. Update existing pivot. So we'll say for this event, we'll update the project name to be state name. We don't even really need this. We can just do this name. Because at this point we've validated the data already. We've already said that this is valid data, so we can just access this directly. Project URL is going to be this URL. And that should be it. So now if we run our test, it should be all green. And let's just run all of our tests to make sure. Typed property event must not be accessed before initialization. So it's not working there, but it was working when we ran it here. It works there, but it doesn't work here. Why is that? Because yes, it's a different test. It's the data validation one, and that's just because we need to pass in the event here. So we'll just do event. So now when we run them, they should all pass, which is great. Out of curiosity, how much of a difference does parallel testing make? We've only got 10 tests, so I doubt it's going to make much of a difference. Oh, okay, we need to install some plugins. Let's just leave that alone. Cool, so we've got some tests. We're testing that the database is updated correctly, which is perfect. If we go to submit, we're also going to want like a success message. So if I just put a GitHub URL here, it doesn't really matter. So when I've done that and you click submit, we need to reset the form and say thank you for your submission. I've already got an alert for this, which I haven't turned into a component. I've just got like an inline one up here. So inside of, let's actually just create a new component, alert.blade. And this is a success alert, so we'll name it as such. This all needs to be placed in there. So back in our submit blade, at the very top, we can just include that component, make it self-closing. And all this component does is check if the session has a message header. And if it does, it renders the alert. It takes out the header and shows out the puts out the body as well. And then there's a tiny bit of Alpine just up here, which will remove the banner or the alert after 5 seconds. And we are using Alpine 3, so we don't need the X data. We can just use X in it on its own, which is really nice. It's one less attribute that you have to remember to add. And $L is going to reference the current element here, which is great. So we go back to Chrome. If I hit submit, let's just add something to the session. So we can session put message header. We'll say thank you for your submission. And we can also put the message body, and your submission will be reviewed after the event has finished. That will be fine. And now if we submit that, the banner is shown at the top, and then after 5 seconds it disappears quite abruptly. There's no transitions or anything snazzy. It's just a quick disappearing act. So that's great. The other thing that we want to do is allow people to come back and edit this data later on. So if I refresh the page, all of my data's gone, and this has been rendered for some reason. That is because I need to flash. I need to flash that instead. Yeah, that needs to be a flash. What am I doing elsewhere? Am I doing flash? Yeah, I am. So that needs to be a flash. I'll fix that. Just to quickly get rid of that, I'm just going to write a mount method that will just like session forget message header. Can pass an array there. Message body, and that's all gone. Perfect. So yeah, we want to pre-fill this data, and I've done this in here already. So I've got a couple of methods on the user model, just convenience methods. So I'll say has submitted project for event. You know, these aren't super optimized, but the quick and easy solutions are going to be the simplest in this case. So where UUID and where not null project name, or we actually want to make this like a grouped where is not empty. Is this going to receive the event? And we'll say event project name and event project URL. So where these are truthy. And then in the mount method up here, so mounts, we can say if the user has submitted project for this event, then we'll get the pivot, which is going to be the user events with pivot value. Okay, I guess, yeah, we can do first where. So first where ID is this event ID and get the pivot, and then we can use this form fill. The fill method is something specific to filament forms. It's going to handle hydration hooks and dehydration hooks. So calling this just ensures that anything we add later on will work correctly with filament. I mean, ultimately, all it's going to do is take the values we give it and set the values on the public properties. So we'll say pivot, project name. The URL is pivot project URL. And I'm going to default confirmation to false so that when you update your details, when you update the information for your submission, you have to reconfirm. Explode argument number 2 must be of type string closure giving. That is because in the user model I've done where, but really I need to say filter. And that will work nicely. If we, so where UUID filter, let's just DD this collection, is empty. Let's DD the event. So the event, this event's where, oh right, we need the pivot. Yeah, so there should be relations, pivot, attributes. So that should work now. We can refresh and all of our data's there, and we can't submit just because we haven't confirmed. We haven't hit the confirmation yet, but if we submit again, it will do all of that. Let's double check our tests are still working. Nope, one of them is failing. It can be mounted. And the reason that's happening is because we're relying on the event being there, which in a web scenario it will be. But inside of the tests, we're not explicitly passing the event through. So what I'm actually going to do is just create a little helper function here and just call it Should I do it like this? Function, get component with event. That can be static. No, it can't. This will do all of this logic. And it will also return that. So get submit component, get submit component with event, get submit component with event, and we can assert the status is 200. What does this actually return? A testable live wire. Testable live wire. So we can assert the status, do it there, and we can actually perform the assertion up here as well. So then we can get rid of all of that code, get submit component with events. And now if we run our tests, one of them is failing, undefined variable event. Right, of course, because we haven't actually got access to the event outside of here anymore. Let's think of a cool way to do this. So we could like return a tuple-like array. I spent far too long using Rust, but we could return the event here as well as the component. That could work. But then that kind of makes this syntax nasty. So could we take a reference to an event property, perhaps? And then down here, that would be like event, event, and event. Does that work? That does work. Yeah, because what we're doing here is we're telling this function that we're going to give it a variable reference, or we're going to say, here's a reference to a variable. Do whatever you want with that reference. Like if you've ever seen preg match, this third argument, matches, is a reference. So you could do test, but you could put variable matches in there. You don't have to define matches anywhere, because putting the variable there is enough to tell the PHP engine to declare that variable and assign to it. So we're assigning to event here. So then when we use event further down here, it's going to be an instance of event. There's no way for us to know that. Perhaps we can kind of do like app param app models event. That could work. So that is, if we go further down here, that is now an event, and this is still an event. That could work. Yeah, I think I like that. That's fine by me. And that kind of like introduces a domain-specific language to this test. You know, we've got this helper method that will explicitly set up the world that we're trying to test. So that'll be the event, the user's events, asserting that the database has the correct data, and also creating the livewire component, or the testable livewire component. So all of our tests are passing, which is great. I mean, down here we can like assert that we see some sort of value. If we just double check what we set the message to, so we can assert that we see this, perhaps. Yep, that passes. So that's, again, we're checking that the session is being interacted with and the alert is rendering on the page. That's brilliant. So let's just create a branch called feature submission process. Let's do a commit. So we build and test basic submission process. It's fine. Just need to secure my commits. Can push that up. The final thing we need to do then is add a button somewhere in here to let the user submit their project. Now, where is the best place to do this? Probably up here somewhere near the top. So we could put it on the same line as this header. That could work. So there is an event header, which is very nasty. Like, the theme has been hard-coded for now, just because we've only got one event, but you know, these things happen. So why don't we wrap that in a div? We'll give it flex, items, center, justify between. And let's also modify our button slightly. So we can pass through an as. And this will basically let us use the button as a link. So then up here we can say x button as an a tag, submit project. And did I give this route a name? I did. So we can set the href to be root events dot submit, and the event is the current one. How does this look? We get the button up here. It's quite big. Like, there's a lot of blue buttons going on over here, but I'm going to leave it for now, and that will take you to that page. That's perfect. We also need to make sure that the event ends at is not in the past. Well, no, we need to make sure that that it's not in the past. So when the event ends, you can't submit projects anymore. So that will probably be the best way to do that. So the event isn't in the past, but if we kind of force it to be in the past, event first, app models event first. Yeah, let's update this ends at to be now subaday, like so. And then this button should disappear because the event is in the past. We can no longer submit. We'll also need to double check this in the component. So let's just do that as a piece of middleware. So event is active. So the event will be the request route event. Let's just DD out the event for now. And add this middleware. So event is active. Then back in Chrome, we get the event UUID. Why is that? I want the event model. I'm not going to leave the syntax like that. It's going to do the same thing, isn't it? So I can say event equals event find by UUID, import class, Is there actually a way to do this? So Laravel access root parameters in middleware, root model bindings. In the middleware. No, this isn't quite what I want. There you go, there's something on the ideas page. Let's close some of this stuff anyway. How about well, that should be an event to begin with. So what if I use the request root event UUID? What if I use the bound equivalent? It's going to return null. Okay, let's just do UUID equals this for now. We'll say event equals event, find by UUID, or find or fail by UUID. And then we can say if event starts at is in the past and the event ends at is not in the past. Okay, so or if the event starts at is not in the past, or if the event ends at is in the past, then we'll just abort with a like 403 for now. Yeah, that'll work. Is it find by UUID or fail? Again, this is a package that I wrote, a very simple UUID package for models. It's just a trait that you use on the model, and it has some helper methods for finding models. So if I go to Chrome, refresh, this is going to fail because the event is in the past. If we go back into Tinker and set it to now add a day, we'll be able to access that page again, which is great. We can submit our project, and yeah, I think that's pretty much everything we need. Let's just run all of our tests again. And for clarity's sake, why don't we send an email to somebody when they've submitted a project, or at least for the first time when they've submitted a project. So we can do that by creating a new mailable. We'll just say project submitted. We'll use Markdown, and we'll do mail.project submitted. Submission received. Thank you for your submission, or thank you for submitting a project to the event name. Your project will be reviewed after the event has finished. Yeah, that's fine. So then in the project submitted mail, we can get rid of some of this. We can accept the event that was submitted for, as well as the user. And down here, so PHP 8, so we can use property promotion. We've already got this, so we can say send it to this user. From is already done, I believe. If not, we'll just say no reply at larajam.dev. Subjects, submission, received. Reply to info@larajam.dev. You can use the button below to update your submission, or if you need to update your submission, please use the button below. And let's do mail. Is it button? I'm going to need to check now. So Laravel markdown button, @mail button, and then the URL as well. Let's just copy that. I didn't really need to copy that, did I? I can just say URL, and update submission. And then back up here, we just need to pass in that URL. So we'll say root events.submit for this event. Perfect. And let's just get mailhog running. So let's just delete all of those. And subscribe just to find out what the heck just happened there. Is that a Finder on steroids? Yeah, this is Raycast. So there is a pinned message in the chat for a gist file or a gist file, which contains a JavaScript script. So what I can do is I can type in Laravel, hit enter, and then search the Laravel documentation. So if I want to find out about controllers, I can hit enter, and in the background what it does is it sends a request to Algolia, which is the search index that powers the search bar up here. It does that, it gets the first result and opens my browser to that URL. It's a lot quicker than me going to laravel.com and searching it or searching Google. So yeah, there's a gist. It's pinned in the chat. Let me just paste the link again for you there. Yeah, Raycast is brilliant. I'm looking forward to the I'm not sure if they've even released it yet, but they were talking about doing like a normal plugin API instead of the custom scripting solution, which would be pretty cool because then you can just build plugins and share them. But yeah, so check it out. Try and install my Raycast script. I use it a bunch. You know, I'm pretty good with Laravel, but there's some things that you need to search the documentation for sometimes. Yes, I think they will have a way. Yeah, I think so. It'll be JavaScript or Swift, probably. I did originally write the Laravel helper in Swift, but it was so slow. So slow. I don't really know why. I guess it's because it's being compiled before it's being executed, whereas the JavaScript is just interpreted straight away. So let's, what were we doing? I can't remember what we were doing. Oh right, I need to edit some open active file in new window. I need to edit some environment variables quickly off screen, just so that no one steals my Mailgun account. So let's just comment out all of those. And do that. So we've got an SMTP 0000 1025, and that should do us nicely. So let's try and submit our projects. We need We actually need to send the email in the first place. Where's the best place to do that? We need to mail queue. Do we want to queue it up? Yeah, let's queue it up. Submission. What did I call it? Project submitted for this event and the current user. And we can also test this. So it correctly updates the event user record and sends an email. So we'll say mail fake at the very top. And just after here, we can assert or mail assert queued and project submitted. So now let's try and run our tests. Everything passes, which means it is all working. And if we try to manually submit this, submit, we've got our email in here. So submission received. Thank you for submitting a project. Your project will be reviewed after the event has finished. If you need to update your submission, please use the button below, and that will take you back to that page. Perfect. On mobile, so feeling lazy, but is Raycast available for Windows? Might not want to send the email every single time, just the first time, just the form. Yeah, that's right. So that's kind of what I was doing before. I was sending emails every time someone registered for the event as well. But I had some issues with my mail provider, so I just turned all my emails off basically. So hopefully we shouldn't have any issues with this email. But yeah, you are right. We only want to do that the first time. So a really crude way of doing that is inside of the submit, update existing pivots. This is also only going to work for this is only going to work if you've already submitted the project as well, right? So if I do event user first, if I just delete that, column not found, delete from event user where, of course, because there's no primary key. Is update existing pivot gonna get currently attached? Where first? If there is a pivot, it fills it. If updated, pivot save. Yeah, so really what I want to do here is event user latest. So this is the one I've just submitted, but if I so the reason this is working is because we're assuming someone's already registered for the event as well. So we can guarantee that they've we can guarantee that this pivot row exists because it gets created when you register for the event. So that's fine. We can leave it like that. But what's the best way to so it returns this, which returns an int. Pivot fill is dirty. I guess here we could actually say like has already submitted project equals let's just move this into a public function get pivot property. Let's just do this. This is like really dirty, but I mean, if it works, it works. So we can say this pivot project name and this pivot project URL. And if not, has already submitted project, meaning the project name is empty and the project URL is empty. We can do that. Up here we can say this pivot and this pivot. That is fine. Yeah, so if the project name and the project URL is present, then we've already submitted the project. And if we haven't, then we'll queue the email up. We can test that here. So we can say submit and open Mailhog up. And we didn't get another email. But if we go into Tinker, event, user, latest, update, project name, just set it to null, project URL, we can set to null. This should all be empty. So now if I fill this in, we can just do like github.com, confirm, submit. We get another email, which is exactly what we're expecting. So git commit, feature, add submit button and confirmation email. Perfect. So it's 10 to 9. So we'll finish up real soon. We've been going for an hour and a half. We can also test that. You know, if the test's going to pass, yep. But if I called, let's just store the component. If I call component, call submit, then I need to assert that nothing or not queued. It was queued. Mail. Do I need to like stop faking? Or because yeah, at this point it has queued, but we've not handled the queued, like queue fake queue clear. No, is there a way to like clear? Let's dd mail assert or queued. Let's just get all of the queued. Oh well, your Visual Studio Code looks insane. Don't suppose there's anywhere for your settings. There's not actually. I change it all of the time. I change between light and dark themes, fonts, line height. I change it quite often, so I haven't actually got anywhere for my settings. Maybe I'll look into that though. In terms of like theme, so I'm using the GitHub Lite theme. I'm using Fira Code for the font. My line height is incredibly high, 45. I can never get IntelliSense to work with VS Code, but I love how lightweight. Yeah, definitely. I use a lot of other programming languages as well, so VS Code's perfect for me. For the IntelliSense though, one thing I always see people forgetting to do is if you just search PHP Basic, so I'm using IntelliSense. I'm using IntelliSense for the IntelliSense. That's a mouthful. But when you enable this, you want to go in here and disable PHP Suggest Basic, and also the validation. Because VS Code comes with some PHP support, very basic, as the name suggests. So maybe if you give it another try, just make sure you've disabled all of these options. I've also got Laravel Intellisense. Laravel Extra Intellisense, which does lots of autocomplete stuff. Similar to, the PHP Storm equivalent. I can't remember what it's called. But similar to that, but for VS Code. That works really well. So let's just run this test and see what gets output. So there is only one item. Is there any way to clear the queued Mailables? Let's just see where this is being used. It's always a pain going from PHP Storm to like WebStorm. Yeah, give it a go. Valet over Docker. Yes, I do use Valet. Docker's fine. It's very, very slow on Mac compared to how it is on Linux. And the RAM consumption is insane. Especially so I work on a bunch of different projects. I don't just have one project. So having the dedicated domains is really helpful, because I haven't got to use localhost or change my hosts file. So Valet is really good for that. But I also work on non-Laravel projects, and if I just want to spin up a static site, I can just point Valet to that directory and have a URL for that as well. I don't need to set up Docker for a static HTML file. Is there any way to clear the queued Mailables? True, always will be slow because it has to virtualize on Mac. Yeah, exactly. There's no KVM or anything like that. And I'm on Silicon as well, so I think it uses QEMU or QEMU. I don't think it uses KVM. How do I clear the queued Mailables? I basically want to say, assume that the queue has picked up that Mailable. Assume that it's picked up that Mailable and handled it. Does anyone know of any way to do that? Because what does swap do? It sets the resolved instance. I suppose one really dirty way of doing it is clearing the resolved instances. yeah, clearing the resolved instances and then re-faking. Is that gonna fix the problem? Yeah, that fixes it. What am I trying to do? So when you submit your project, the first time you submit the project, you get an email to say, thank you for submitting. We've received your submission. And then if you were to submit your project again, we want to make sure that we don't send you another email because you've already submitted. You're just going to update your data, basically. But because I've faked the mail facade, when I call it the first time inside of this test, it's catching that email, it's catching that mailable. And then when I try to call submit again down here and assert that nothing has been queued, the faked facade, the mail fake, is actually catching that still. It's still got the queued mailable in memory. So it's assuming that something has been queued, but it hasn't really. In real life, nothing would have been queued. That would have been sent off to the queue. This should really be done in like a separate test. But I'm just kind of being lazy. So the way I'm fixing that is by clearing the faked instance and then re-faking, which works, I suppose. I was going to say I'd approach that in a separate test. Yeah, no, 100% it should be in a separate test. The only reason I'm not testing it in a separate test is because there's a lot of setup. Like, we need to make sure that you've got a submission with data, and for now this is still going to cover it because I'm making assertions. So if anything does change, that test is going to fail. I guess I can change the name. It correctly updates the event user record and sends an email the first time, but not the second time. So if I run that file, it's going to pass. Cool. Is there anything else that needs to be done? I don't think so. We've got an email. We've got, well, I suppose it'd be nice to show the event name on that page, actually. So we can do that just up here by including the partials event header and hiding that button. And so if the event is not in the past and the request is not submit, show that button. Otherwise, show it there. Great. Oh, what is happening there? Oh, of course, because we're using Livewire, the button's going to show up. Yeah, because when we re-render this, component, the request is actually going to be something other than submit, because it's going to be the Livewire request URL. Or not show submit button, which is going to be false by default, or show submit button true. This is a really hacky way of doing it, but show submit button we can set to false for this particular view. Yep, perfect. And undefined variable show submit button. That is, I need to wrap this in some extra parentheses. Submit, back to event, submit, bish bash bosh, PHP and test, So all of our tests are still passing. What did we actually do? So added that, did that, and we just said tests. Ensure Mailable does not get sent more than once. That commit message is far too long, but I don't really care. Awesome, cool. So we've built out the entire submission process really. We're nearly at 2 hours. So for the next 15 minutes, we'll go for 2 hours. We will build out a CSV export so that I can download just a long list of submissions, basically. Do you use Forge for hosting? Well, technically Forge isn't the host, is it? It's the deployment platform. But I use a mixture. I use Forge for some things. I use Ploy for others. So a lot of my client work is on Ploy, but a lot of my personal stuff is on Forge. It's a mix and match. I've got a collection of different servers across different providers as well. So I've got some DigitalOcean, some Vultr. It's all over the place. So let's require Sparsy Simple Excel. And let's create a command called generate submission export, and I'll do this in a scripts folder. Generate submission export. So script generate submission export. Generate CSV export containing submission information. And then let's do, we'll need the event ID. Let's use Nuno's Nuno Maduro console list. Console menu, that's the one. So let's use this package because I basically want to select the event. This is like future proofing. Right now there's only one event, but we'll do some future proofing. So we just call this menu. So we'll say events equals this menu, choose events. This will be a collection, or we can just say event all, map with keys, and does it accept? How does this work, the menu method? Can I pass a key and a value? Value string label. I can. Perfect. Yeah, so value and then label. So we'll accept the event and return an array where we have the event ID and the event name. And we'll open that. Let's just DD the event. PHP artisan script, generate submission export. Must be of type array, but I've given it a collection, so we'll just do all. The colors are a bit messy there, but I can see it just enough. You probably won't be able to see that on the stream. But it's clear enough for me. Let's do exit. Can I say that it's required? Well, it doesn't really matter. I can just do it like that. So event equals event find event, and then we can do CSV equals simple Excel writer, create a path to a file. So we'll just do path equals storage path, and then exports, submissions, time, I'll just do now, format YMD, HIS, export.csv. We use the path, and then for each of the event users as user, let's do this. Find the event with users. We'll say CSV. We'll add some headers as well. Add row. That will be the. Oh no, we don't need to do that. It will use the array keys as the rows. So we can say user ID is the user's ID. Event ID is the event ID. The project name is the user pivot project name. The project URL is the user pivot project URL. And then CSV close. And now a file will exist at that point. So there is an error. Failed to open stream, no such file. That is because this needs to be storage. Put. We'll just do an empty string. Still an error. No writers supporting the given type. What is the type? It's a CSV file. But do I need to explicitly say type CSV? Yep, I do apparently. How comes that is being output there? Path is a Boolean, that is why. So let's just do file name and create a bunch of variables, why not? So we can put the file, this is going to be storage path of that file. This is some seriously messy code, but I'm the only person that's going to be using this, so it's not really a big deal. Failed to open stream, no such file or directory. Storage app exports. I would have to disagree with you. There is definitely a file there. Definitely a file. What is being DD'd out of here? Exports, storage, exports. Oh, it's because it's going into storage app, which is correct. So do I need to do storage path of the file? Yep, and then that should have some data in here, which it does. And then I want to just send a raw email to myself. submission CSV for or here is the here is the submissions export that you just ran. This is going to receive a message. I can say message to info@larajam.com .dev from, doesn't matter, attach storage path, just import the path, subject, submission, export, undefined variable path. That is because it is called file. Can do some nasty inline assignments here. That should do the trick. So if we run this and check mailhog, we get the export and we get the CSV file, which is exactly what we want. So let's just commit this feature, add messy submissions exporter. Another great package from the guys over at Sparsy. And I think that just about wraps up the live stream. So nearly 2 hours, which is pretty good. We've done quite a bit. We wrote some tests with Pest to test the Livewire component. We've also written an export tool, some emails, looked at filament forms. So yeah, if you're taking part in Larajam, remember the submission deadline is 7 PM, so 7 o'clock in the evening, BST or UTC +1 on Sunday, the 10th of October. The theme is personal productivity. If you're out of ideas, think, to-do lists or calendars, add some snazzy features. Submissions need to be in before 7 PM BST, UTC +1 on Sunday. You can use that submission form that we've just built. And registration will also close at that time. So you need to register before then and submit before then. Please make sure your project has a README file with any installation instructions and that it is a public repository. Because if it's not, I won't be able to view it and I won't be able to share it later on when, if you potentially win a prize, I won't be able to share your project. So make sure you follow those criteria. And yeah, if you are taking part, enjoy, have fun. Hop in the Discord as well. It's on the Twitter page. And yeah, I look forward to seeing your submissions. Thank you everyone for watching along. It's been a long stream, but we got there in the end, so thank you. And I will speak to you shortly.